Around 50 Russian military vehicles, including fuel trucks, ammunition carriers, and other transport vehicles, were reportedly inside an area targeted by a Ukrainian strike after Moscow was forced to shift part of its logistics activity away from the Chongar bridge. That number is about more than a single attack on a convoy. In modern warfare, danger does not always begin when an ammunition depot explodes or a military base comes under attack. Sometimes it begins when an army is forced to change the way it moves fuel, ammunition, and reinforcements. Chongar, one of the key connections between Crimea and southern Ukraine, was reportedly heavily damaged in recent strikes. That forced Russia to adjust part of its supply network and redirect traffic toward alternate routes in northwestern Crimea. Normally, a new route helps solve a problem. But in this case, the replacement corridor appears to have quickly become a target under observation as well. That raises a much bigger question than the fate of a single bridge or a single convoy. Is Ukraine simply carrying out isolated strikes? Or is Kyiv trying to turn Russia's entire logistics network in southern Ukraine and Crimea into a system that is constantly forced to adapt, constantly monitored, and constantly exposed to the risk of attack? Let's take a closer look with military force. The Chongar Bridge matters because it is more than a crossing between Crimea and southern Ukraine. It is part of the road system that helps Russia move military supplies toward the occupied south, especially toward the Kherson and Zaporizhia directions. In a war shaped by artillery, drones, and long supply lines, a bridge like this can carry more strategic weight than its physical size suggests. It helps keep fuel trucks moving, ammunition flowing, repair vehicles circulating, and replacement units connected to the front. When such a bridge is badly damaged, the first problem is visible on the surface. Traffic slows or stops. Heavy trucks cannot move as planned. Repair crews must inspect the structure, secure the area, and decide whether the crossing can safely carry military loads again. But the deeper problem sits behind the bridge. Every delay on a route like Chongar can affect the rhythm of the entire supply chain it supports. For Russian forces in southern Ukraine, that rhythm is critical. Units near the front do not only need weapons, they need steady fuel for vehicles, ammunition for artillery, spare parts for damaged equipment, food, medical supplies, and transport capacity for rotation. If those items arrive late, commanders may still hold their positions, but their room for action becomes narrower. That is how a transport problem can become a battlefield problem without changing the front line itself. This is why damage to Chongar should be viewed as a pressure point, not only as an infrastructure strike. A bridge can be repaired, but the time spent repairing it can create operational costs. Engineers must work under the threat of new strikes. Air defense and security units may need to protect the site. Transport planners must slow movement, change schedules, or reduce the number of vehicles using the route while repairs continue. The effect is not always immediate collapse. Modern armies can often adjust, especially when they still have other roads, temporary crossings, or alternate corridors. The more important issue is consistency. A supply network works best when traffic is predictable for its own planners, but difficult for the enemy to target. Once a key crossing is disrupted, that balance begins to weaken. Chongar therefore becomes a bottleneck because it forces Russia to spend attention on movement instead of only on combat. The bridge may not decide the war by itself, and it does not prove that Russian forces in the south are cut off. But it does show how one damaged route can slow the machine that supports the battlefield. When a main artery is under pressure, Russia cannot simply stop supplying its troops. It must push traffic toward other corridors, and that creates the next problem. After Chongar was disrupted, Russia had to move part of its southern supply traffic toward the Armyansk and Predictive direction. This adjustment may look simple on a map, but for a military logistics system, changing a route is never only about choosing another road. It changes timing, fuel use, convoy planning, security needs, and the way supplies reach units already operating under pressure. In southern Ukraine, where Russian forces must support positions across Kherson and Zaporizhia, even a limited shift in traffic can create a wider strain. The Armyansk and Perekop area sits in the northwestern part of Crimea, where roads can still connect the peninsula with occupied territory to the north. For Russia, these corridors offer a practical fallback when the Chongar route becomes harder to use. They allow fuel trucks, ammunition vehicles, repair teams, and troop transport to keep moving instead of stopping completely. That matters because no army can fight for long if its supply chain freezes, even briefly. But an alternate route is not the same as an equal route. The original line through Chongar was valuable because it helped move traffic along a direct and familiar path. When transport planners must send vehicles through another corridor, every movement becomes more complicated. Trucks may travel farther. Drivers may spend more hours on the road. Fuel consumption rises, and maintenance needs increase as vehicles operate under heavier demand. This cost is not only mechanical, it also affects command decisions. A commander who expects fuel in the morning may receive it later. A unit waiting for ammunition may have to reduce fire before the next delivery arrives. A repair group may not reach damaged vehicles as quickly as planned. These delays may not be dramatic enough to collapse a front line, but they can reduce the freedom Russian officers have when they prepare attacks, rotations, or emergency movements. There is also a problem of traffic density. When one important route becomes less usable, more vehicles are pushed into fewer corridors. That concentration can create congestion at checkpoints, road junctions, staging areas, and temporary waiting points. A convoy that once moved through several possible routes may now become easier to notice because more movement is flowing through the same narrow space. This is where logistics becomes vulnerable. Military transport is safest when it is spread out, flexible, and hard to read. It becomes even more exposed when vehicles repeat the same roads, stop in the same places, or move in larger clusters. Even if the road itself remains open, the pattern of movement can become easier to study. In a battlefield filled with drones, electronic monitoring, and long-range strike systems, patterns can be dangerous. Russia can still adapt. It can break convoys into smaller groups, use night movement, rely on camouflage, increase air defense coverage, or send more security units along the route. These measures may help keep supplies moving for a time, and they show why one damaged bridge does not automatically cut off Russian forces in the south. Still, every adaptation carries a price. Smaller convoys may be harder to hit, but they move less cargo at once. Night movement can reduce visibility, but it can also slow driving and increase accidents. Extra protection helps defend key roads, but it pulls air defense, electronic warfare, and manpower away from other missions. Local roads may offer concealment, but they may not handle heavy military traffic as well as major routes. That is why the shift toward Armyansk and Perekop matters. It gives Russia a way to avoid an immediate supply break, but it also changes the shape of the battlefield behind the front. The logistical burden does not disappear. It moves, spreads, and becomes harder to manage. And once more, Russian traffic begins to depend heavily on these corridors. The Armyansk route is no longer just a detour. It becomes the next weak point in the system. Ukraine's advantage in this phase was not only the ability to strike a route, but the ability to anticipate where Russian traffic would move next. After Chongar was damaged, Ukrainian forces said they had prepared for the possibility that Russian logistics would shift toward alternative corridors. That preparation matters because military supply movements are not random. They follow habits, road capacity, fuel needs, security patterns, and the pressure of time. When one route becomes difficult, the next likely route can often be predicted if enough attention has already been placed on the network. This is why the focus moved beyond the damaged bridge itself. The main targets for observation were the vehicles that keep an army alive behind the front. Fuel trucks, ammunition carriers, troop transport, repair vehicles, and support convoys all reveal something about the condition of a force. A fuel convoy can show where armored units may need to operate. Ammunition movement can suggest artillery demand. Reinforcement traffic can point to areas where commanders expect pressure or losses. Ukraine did not need to see every order inside the Russian command system. It only needed to watch the physical signs of supply. Roads, waiting areas, vehicle clusters, and repeated movements can expose intent without a spoken message. In a war where drones and sensors can watch roads for long periods, logistics can become a language of its own. The important shift here is from reacting to targets toward predicting them. A simple strike looks for what is visible now. A deeper campaign asks where the next convoy will appear, which route will become crowded, and what kind of cargo is most important at that moment. That difference can change the tempo of a battle far behind the trench line. Ukraine's reported approach followed a clear chain. First, identify the supply pressure created by the damage to Chongar. Then, watch the alternative roads that Russia could use. Next, track the movement of military vehicles and separate routine traffic from higher-value convoys. After that, choose the moment when disruption would create the greatest effect. This kind of process is slower than a sudden battlefield attack, but it can be more dangerous because it turns Russian adaptation into evidence. Every change in direction, every new gathering point, and every repeated route helps build a clearer picture of the supply system. That is why Russia's response to a damaged bridge may have opened a new opportunity for Ukraine. When Moscow moved traffic away from Chongar, it was trying to preserve supply flow, not create weakness. But in modern war, movement itself can become exposure. The more Russia needs to move fuel, ammunition, and reinforcements through predictable corridors, the more those corridors can be studied. This does not mean every Russian convoy becomes an easy target. Bad weather, air defense, electronic warfare, camouflage, and distance can still limit Ukrainian strikes. It also does not prove that Ukraine can fully control every road leading out of Crimea. The point is narrower, but still serious. If Ukraine can predict the next logistical adjustment, Russia loses part of the safety that alternate routes are supposed to provide. In that sense, the campaign is not only about damaging infrastructure. It is about forcing a reaction, reading that reaction, and turning it into a new operational chance. Russia may still have roads to use, but the value of those roads falls if Ukraine can forecast where the next traffic surge will appear. And when Russian convoys began concentrating on the substitute route, surveillance could move from preparation into action with greater speed, accuracy, and confidence than it had. The reported strike near Armyansk showed why an alternate route can quickly become a new vulnerability. After traffic moved away from Chongar, Ukraine said it struck the Armyansk route, where Russian military vehicles had gathered as part of the shifted supply flow. This was not just another road incident. It was a warning that a replacement corridor does not automatically restore safety. If the enemy can watch the change, the detour may become as dangerous as the damaged route it was meant to replace. According to Ukrainian accounts cited in reporting, around 50 Russian military vehicles were in the area, targeted by the strike. The reported group included fuel trucks, ammunition carriers, and other transport vehicles. These are not symbolic targets. They are the practical tools that keep an army moving. Fuel allows armored vehicles, trucks, generators, and support systems to operate. Ammunition keeps artillery and frontline units supplied. Transport vehicles move men, spare parts, food, medical equipment, and replacement gear. But the exact scale of the damage has not been fully released. That matters for credibility. It would be wrong to claim that all 50 vehicles were destroyed unless confirmed evidence shows that. The more careful reading is that Ukraine targeted a large logistics concentration on a route Russia was using after Chongar became harder to rely on. Even if only part of the convoy was hit, the effect could still be serious. A logistics strike does not need to destroy every vehicle to create disruption. It can force surviving drivers to stop, turn back, wait for clearance, or move under tighter security. It can block a section of road while damaged vehicles burn or are removed. It can delay the next convoy because commanders must check whether the route is still usable. It can also force Russia to spread traffic across smaller groups, which may reduce the amount of cargo moved in each trip. This is why the Armyansk strike matters beyond the visible damage. The military value lies in interruption. A fuel truck delayed by several hours can affect vehicles waiting closer to the front. Ammunition that arrives late can change how much artillery a unit is willing to fire. A convoy forced to pause can create new congestion behind it. In a large war, these delays may look small one by one, but they can build pressure across the wider supply chain. The strike also exposed a basic problem with forced rerouting. When Russia shifts traffic into another corridor, that corridor can become crowded with the same supplies the army cannot afford to lose. More vehicles mean more movement to monitor, more pauses to observe, and more chances for a strike to matter. The road may still exist, but its usefulness begins to depend on whether it can carry traffic without becoming predictable. Armyansk therefore became more than a backup route. It became a test of whether Russia could move supplies under pressure while Ukraine watched for the next concentration of valuable targets. The lesson is clear. A substitute corridor only solves the first problem if it does not create another one. To make a road this dangerous, Ukraine needs more than firepower. It needs a system fast enough to find, confirm, and hit the right target before the convoy disappears from view. Ukraine's strikes on Russian logistics depend on more than a single drone finding a vehicle on a road. They depend on a wider system that connects reconnaissance, strike units, electronic intelligence, data, and command decisions. This matters because the target is not just one truck. The target is the movement pattern that tells Ukraine where Russia is trying to keep its army supplied. Once that pattern is understood, a road becomes more than a road. It becomes a map of fuel demand, ammunition flow, and pressure. Reconnaissance UAVs are usually the first layer of this system. They watch roads, junctions, staging areas, and places where vehicles may wait before moving forward. Their role is not only to look for something to hit immediately. Their role is to build a picture of how Russian transport behaves after a route is disrupted. Electronic intelligence can add another layer. Radio traffic, signals activity, and communication habits may help identify when a supply movement is being organized. Battlefield data then gives commanders a way to compare what drones see with what other sources suggest. If several signs point to the same corridor, the target becomes clearer. This is why the operation is different from a normal ambush. Ukraine does not have to strike every vehicle on the road. It has to identify the part of the supply chain that matters most at that moment. A fuel truck may be more valuable than a light vehicle. An ammunition carrier may matter more than an empty transport. Vehicles near a junction may be more important than one truck moving alone. The goal is to slow the flow, not simply count destroyed machines. If the right vehicle is hit, the effect can spread beyond the blast site. Other drivers may stop. Commanders may delay movement. Security teams may be redirected. A route that looked usable may require fresh checks, new escorts, or a different schedule. The most important advantage of this model is speed. In the past, the gap between detecting a target and striking it could be wide. A convoy might be seen, reported, discussed, and gone before a decision was made. Ukraine's newer approach aims to shorten that gap. Information has to move quickly from the observer to the unit that can act. The faster that link works, the less time Russia has to hide, disperse, or pass through the danger area. This turns Russian logistics into a chain of moving targets rather than a safe rear system. Trucks, fuel carriers, support vehicles, and staging areas all become part of the same picture. Each movement can provide a clue, and each clue can shape the next strike opportunity. But this also shows why Chongar and Armyansk are only part of the story. The real issue is the expanding method behind the attacks. If Ukraine can keep linking sensors, intelligence, and strike units, then pressure on Russian logistics will not stay limited to one bridge or one detour. It can spread across the southern supply network. Chongar is important, but it is not the whole story. The pressure on Russian logistics in the south is now spread across several points, and that is what makes the situation more serious for Moscow. If only one bridge is damaged, Russia can search for another route. But when ports, roads, junctions, bridges, and transport corridors are all under threat, the problem becomes larger than one repair job. This is why earlier strikes around Mariupol, Berdyansk, and other southern routes matter in the same picture. These areas help support the movement of equipment, fuel, ammunition, and supplies across occupied territory. When they are placed under pressure, Russian planners must think about more than the fastest road. They must think about which road is watched, which route can carry heavy traffic, which convoy needs protection, and which delay may affect units closer to the front. The military effect is cumulative. One disrupted route may slow a delivery. A second threatened route may force a convoy to wait. A third pressure point may require more escorts, more air defense, or a new schedule. None of these problems must destroy the supply network by itself. Together, they can make the network less efficient and more costly to operate in southern Ukraine. That matters because logistics is about rhythm. Fuel must arrive before vehicles can move. Ammunition must arrive before artillery can maintain pressure. Spare parts must arrive before damaged vehicles return to service. Reinforcements must arrive before units become too worn down. If these flows are delayed again and again, a force may still fight, but it may fight with less speed and fewer choices. For Russia, the danger is not only losing trucks. The danger is being forced to manage movement under constant pressure. A route used today may need to be changed tomorrow. A convoy that once moved in a larger group may need to be split. A road that looked useful may become risky if Ukraine begins to observe it more closely. This is why Chongar should be seen as one part of a wider campaign. Ukraine appears to be targeting the system behind the front, not only the troops at the front. Still, pressure is not the same as full isolation, and that distinction is essential for understanding what comes next. Russia's logistics network in Crimea and southern Ukraine has not been fully cut off. That is an important distinction. Moscow still has alternate roads, temporary crossings, repair teams, and the ability to shift traffic when one route becomes unsafe. But the strikes around Chongar, Armyansk, Mariupol, and Berdyansk show that Ukraine is raising the cost of every movement. The goal may not be to isolate Russian forces in one dramatic blow. It may be to force Russia to supply its army while being watched, delayed, and repeatedly pushed onto less secure routes. That kind of pressure can drain time, fuel, vehicles, and command attention. It can also make future attacks harder to organize if ammunition and fuel arrive late. The central question is now clear. Can Russia keep its campaign moving in Kherson and Zaporizhia if every major supply road becomes harder to protect? If you found this analysis useful, please like, subscribe, and support Military Force for more reporting on the weapons, strategies, and geopolitical developments shaping today's conflicts. Our goal is not to glorify war, but to better understand how modern wars are fought, how military decisions affect nations, and why conflicts often carry consequences far beyond the battlefield. Because the more we understand war, the better we can understand the value of peace.